So with this video, we're looking at the topic translating an argument and determining its validity. So with this one, we're kind of moving beyond having to reprove over and over and over again a valid argument. What we're really trying to aim for is if you can read an argument in verbal form and then translate it to symbolic form, and if you recognize that it is one of the valid argument patterns, then you say, okay, that argument's valid, and if it's not, then it's not. So with this one, what we do is we look at it and say, okay, we've got P defined as it is Greg's birthday. We've got Q defined that we are having hamburgers for dinner. And R defined that there will be leftovers. So here's an argument that we are supposed to consider. The first premise is if it is Greg's birthday, then we are having hamburgers for dinner. So if it is Greg's birthday, that means if P, then what? We are having hamburgers for dinner. So that's then Q. So that is a direct translation of that first premise. The second premise says if we are having hamburgers for dinner, then there will be leftovers. So again, that's translating that if we are having hamburgers for dinner. So that's a conditional statement that says if Q, because that hamburger business was statement Q, then what? Then there will be leftovers. So that's then R. So those two, the premise one and premise two are first initial statements, and the conclusion, we say therefore what? Therefore, if it is Greg's birthday, then there will be leftovers. So if it is Greg's birthday, that's if P, excuse me, then there will be leftovers. So then R. So that P implies R. So that's our premise one, that's our premise two, that's our conclusion. So that's what we just wrote right there. So getting that set up into a symbolic form, and then just recognizing, is this a valid argument or not? Well, just to save time rather than having me rewrite something that can appear neatly elsewhere, if you click on explain or if you look in the text, I encourage you to do either one of those things. So here's the explanation without scrolling all the way down to the answer. These are all valid arguments. So if your setup, when you translate the verbal form in the verbal statements into symbols, matches one of those valid argument forms, then your argument's valid. And if not, then it very likely is one of these fallacies that often occur. So those are called invalid arguments. And so we recognize that the one we're dealing with here, and as you do this problem in ALEKS, you're going to get different versions, but the one we're doing here is this law of syllogism. That's transitive reasoning, that if you start with P and P implies Q, and then if you also have Q and Q implies R, then because P implies Q and Q implies R, then it's equivalent to saying that P implies R. So back up here, then we can say that this argument is definitely valid. And again, just to stress this again, as you do these problems, you're gonna translate your argument into symbols, and then it's just a simple matter of, and I say simple, it just takes a little bit of practice. Make flashcards. This is just a perfect place to make flashcards for not just these 4, but really these 8, to recognize that that top row is a bunch of valid arguments and that bottom row is a bunch of invalid arguments. And so then you can just quickly recognize, as opposed to proving, that those statements are, or that those arguments, rather, are in fact valid. one of the other things I want to mention before I quit this particular video, if you do click explain, and this has come up elsewhere, you in fact did these problems as exercises earlier, but if you go down, this is further down in the explain part of this particular problem. If you click on these two things here, these are wonderful resources for just sort of refreshing and reminding you of how we proved that these arguments are valid, or that an argument is not valid. So I really, really encourage you to look at those, and I'll just go back up here one more time, because really this, as the last big topic or last big problem in this unit, you can create even for the problem that we've got. So that was this particular one. But again, you do this again, you might get this one or this one or this one. But we are dealing with this guy right here. You could set up a truth table and you could prove this the long way. But once you've done that once or twice and you realize, okay, I don't need to prove it anymore. I know that this law is true, that if I have this syllogism thing, that it's going to be true every time. And so then you're sort of working beyond having to reprove these things over and over again. And same true with all of those valid arguments. So you're trying to get to a place where you've worked with them enough to where you can then just say, okay, I see that that's what that is, so it's a valid argument.